Hi, this is Tom from Millennium Blackjack. Welcome back. Today we'll be talking about the myths, misdirections, and current status of blackjack card counting. And it would be a good idea, those who haven't seen my previous videos, because they are put in a sequence so that you understand most of the things we're talking about in more details and information that one can search in the books that will have been mentioned. The first thing related to card counting is that in 1958, Ed Canty and Will Marcel and the others, the four gentlemen, did have a workout on basic strategy, which was presented in the first computer conference in 1958 in the United States. And Professor Edward Thorp was one of the panelists. That's how he came across this paper, presented him as one of the person in the panel when it was presented. And then Professor Edward Thorp, during his spare time, he did experiment using high-speed IBM computers that his department of mathematics, MIT, has just received, and was doing this during his spare time, and experimented removing the turns. He found the dealer has got an advantage. When he removes the small cards, the player has got an advantage. That's how card counting came about. And this eventually, after his experiments, he published in this Blackjack bestseller of all time, Beat the Dealer, a strategy for the game, a winning strategy for the game of 21. Which is, and this is the book. If you want to know about card counting, you should read through, because this is where all started. The other people have read through, they make their own interpretation. Some make false interpretations, and some completely erroneous interpretations. So it's very important that if you are interested to read through, so that you can just get it from the horse's mouth as to what is this card counting all about. So like I said earlier, it's about that if the small cards are out of the deck, in case of playing blackjack, if where you are playing the small cards will come out, then the count will go up, and therefore you'll have an advantage. But you must understand what is here. When it's calculated through IBM computers, is that the presumption is that the cards are random or close to random. That's number one. Number two, that all the cards were played. So when he published this book, he was talking about single and double deck games. And in these games, all the cards were being played to the last card. When the dealer don't have any cards anymore to deal, then shuffling took over. So it's very important to read, and that's not what you will see in the games today, or when changes were made in 1979, which is very important that we'll talk about. So the take up home message is that card counting works when low cards are out, and then you've got high cards remaining that will come out, and therefore then you've got an advantage, and you have to bet according to that advantage. You've got to avoid the risk of ruin. So you have to use the Kelly criterion in terms of your betting and your bankroll. That's very, very important. And the next thing is that it was all about single and double deck games, and the games being played to the end. The reason being, if the count is going up, you have to get those 10s coming out to have an advantage. And if some decks are not being played, that you may not have that advantage. So which is very, very important that the games are being played. And the next thing is that Ken Houston came into the picture as being a famous and very flamboyant card counter. And then he was barred in Atlantic City in one of the casinos that belong to Resort International. And Ken Houston then sued Resort International, and indeed he won the case against Resort International, and the court made a ruling that casinos in Atlantic City or in New Jersey cannot bar card counters. So then the casinos had one dilemma to be faced with. They can't offer the game of blackjack if they can't bar card counters, because card counters are winning. They had a 3-week period where they allowed card counters to come in after the court made the judgment. In these 3 weeks, they were documenting how much money card counters were bringing and how much money the casinos were making. And in this 3-week period, card counters were indeed taking more money than they were bringing in. And for them, the game as they were dealing it then was not a viable option for the casinos in Atlantic City. They either have to ditch this game completely, or they have to make changes. That's when all Atlantic City casinos bundled up their funds and get the best mathematicians to assist them with this regard. And then the mathematicians assisted them in that they can still offer the game, provided they make changes to make card counting less effective or ineffective. So that's very important take-home message, that the mathematicians looked at all the formulas of blackjack, like we see them here in Professor Peter Griffin's book, The Theory of Blackjack, all the formulas that are there, and so on and so on. So they could see, or they knew the way to make card counting ineffective. They have to make sure that the Atlantic City's casinos have to introduce the shoe games. That's why they have now they introduced 8 decks. And in those 8 decks, the last 2 or 3 decks are not played. And because then those 10s you might be expecting won't come. And the next thing was to change shuffling technique. So the shuffling technique that was being used at that time for both single and double deck was just a simple shuffling technique, just 2 halves, then shuffle together, just like that. Shuffle together, that's one. And the problem with this shuffle, the cards can flow very randomly in most of the games, and therefore card counting will be effective. So for that reason, apart from the fact that all the decks won't be played, they'll make sure that in between, because as you know, there's also shuffle tracking. You might still have parts of the decks that are favorable. So they also sort of increase the probability that even the decks that will be played will be unfavorable to the players, maybe 80 to 95% of the time. They'll be favoring the house. For that reason, the new shuffling technique, they will have 3 equal decks that they will have 3 equal decks and then when they shuffle, they are taking small piece of a deck on top, and to shuffle to form the fourth, the one that will eventually be the main deck. And in addition, they will do this, we call it stripping, so shuffle and stripping. And the idea behind is that this technique produces what called clumped cards. What it means is that the small cards will tends to be together, and the big cards will then be together. The nines and the tens will be together. So the idea is that the shuffling technique will produce something like this, where small cards are together and the high cards are together. And the other thing you will see, the neutral cards 7 and 8, they tend also to be frequently coming together in those terrible games, even more, something like that, which is very important concept. And the idea behind is what Ken Houston was the first one to describe card clamping in Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas, where he says in the early Caesar's Palace shuffle, he sees an unusual pattern of the cards that are coming through, and typically the count, like he describes, the count will go up, and then even if you double like a 10, you will catch a 4. The dealer, even if the small cards are coming, like here you see 15 makes a 17, the dealer makes a 5 card 17, and you're wiped out, and the 10s are not coming. And when the 10s come out, they come in huge numbers. They come in huge numbers in such a way that often what happens is that you catch a 20 yourself, and with card counting, they might say if you're playing one hands, maybe play two hands, the count is very high, which is fine. You get 20 on one hand, you get another 20 in the second hand, and the dealer has got a 10 showing, and what's gonna happen, the dealer will turn over another 10, and it's a 20, and it's a push. And sometimes the next hand is very similar. In fact, one professional player counted in Connecticut casino 24 10s in a row, and the pit boss was saying also being surprised. But this is what you can see frequently in these games today, because of the way in which the casino shuffle cards, either through the hands, small 4 small equal decks, and then shuffling with stripping, or using automatic shuffling machine, or even worse, a continuous shuffling machine. So that's a basic thing. So the next thing is that is it card counting still viable today? So card counting, like we see, most of people is overtly overrated, and most of the people rating it, they either don't understand the game, what it is all about, and the others, like we said previously, that's mischievous in the sense that they teach people to play card counting. They get their profits through the boot camps and through their subscriptions, and also through their apps, and also through publication of their books, whereas they don't win. And typically some of these people tell you they've won money 20 years ago. Why can't they tell you about the money they've won now, big monies now? It means that, and often even in the past where there's this story, even documentaries, you find they are just BS. They've never won anything. In fact, one of the proponents of this with YouTube channel and apps and things like that, if you watch all the videos, so-called he was bad. there's not a single video where he's winning. The guy plays like a biggest plumpy. He's losing terribly. And when he started raising money, which most likely going to lose if the pit bosses knew that the tents won't come out, he was even going to lose even more. Being bad actually saved these people some money. But they use this to attract people to say, oh, I was barred by the casino, because then it's something dangerous. Why will people be barred by the casinos? There are many reasons why casinos will bar players. The first thing, some of the casinos don't fully understand what is it all about card counting. They just know the previous stories about, oh, card counters are dangerous, and therefore they do the same. That's the first reason they will do so. The next thing, some of the casinos, they do so to continue to perpetuate the belief that if you do a count cards, you win, and everybody does the same. What is very interesting, you see the proponents of this card counting, if you watch a YouTube channel, is the same group. Like there's one guy from the UK who was a magician now proposing this. Is the same thing with the same people with the YouTube and the apps and boot camps, the same thing. So it's the same thing, because it's a scam to let you believe you're gonna win. They charge you huge amount of money for the boot camps, and these are totally worthless. And even more so, in this social media and on Facebook, the groups that are there are run by people being paid by recruiting and continuing to perpetuate that this is the way to play. Whereas the people who are perpetuating this lie are being paid, they are stooges and being paid a stipend for continuing this lie that you are winning. And then this is a very book that was published by Stuart Perry, so-called Las Vegas Blackjack Diary. So Stuart Perry is a professional blackjack player and played blackjack in Las Vegas for 6 weeks. And during this time, he was documenting every play that he had in Las Vegas. And then after the 6 weeks, he was just about even, you know. And then he published all these plays throughout the times, the casinos, what was happening, single deck, which was a single deck or double deck, shoe game, and so on and so on. And when you analyze which games was he winning, he was winning in single and double deck games, and was losing in shoe games, which one will expect from what we just spoken about now, that the way you shuffle the cards and the shoe games will most likely to clump more than a single deck in most of the times. And therefore, if you are playing card counting, you are most probably will do better in single and double deck than the shoe games, because of the way in which cards will clump as they are shuffled, and like discussed previous, also the way the cards are collected, what we call the game control, which were the 2 videos that we have uploaded, so that you can check on them if you're not familiar with the concept of game control that the casino do for in blackjack games to maximize their profits. And then and the next thing is that the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, just out off the strip, around the convention center. You proceed this way west, and then you find the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. Dr. David Schwartz is the director of gambling and statistics in the university, and they're tasked in calculating how much money all the casinos in the United States. They send all the data monthly, where the department, they're calculating how much money each casino is getting from various games, baccarat, roulette, blackjack, and so on, slots and so on. That how much money patrons are bringing, and how much patrons win, and how much the casino win or keep, and then they can show the thing. So what has happened now is that casinos are making more profits in blackjack than ever before. And the reason is because the game is not as it used to be played in the 60s or in the 70s before the changes were made. After 1979, casinos made changes in Atlantic City. Other casinos in the United States and worldwide followed suit, so that they can still provide the game of blackjack in Atlantic City without barring card counters. And most of the changes to an extent, less to a large extent, and some variabilities have been adopted in all casinos in the United States and worldwide. And for that reason, if you look at the table holds of casino, it's not what people will tell you that if you play basic strategy perfectly, then the casino has got a 0.5% advantage over you. That's a BS. That's totally BS. Casinos in Las Vegas, they've got a table holds between 12% and 15%. And if you can see the comment, I will put a picture from University of Nevada, where they indicated that when they calculated, they found it very interesting that for blackjack is very consistent, that table hold of 12 to 15% in Las Vegas. In Atlantic City, between 15% and 20% is very consistent. And what is interesting is that baccarat is more favorable to patrons than blackjack. With roulette, it's almost close to blackjack now as it's played, but with roulette is that the fluctuation is quite erratic. It's got a wide deviation, whereas blackjack is almost. So that anybody who's talk about variance, they're talking BS. Casino just have got an advantage over the players, and is very consistent. And for you, you can check those values that are published, and they are there in the web for every casino. You can actually pick the casino of your choice and see how much patrons are bringing in, how much the casino wins, and how much you can also, by deduction, how much players can take out. So blackjack card counting is totally overrated. Most of the people talking about blackjack with boot camps, apps, YouTube channel, and books, they are totally BS. They've got no clue what they're talking about. They are mischievous and just misleading people. And then if you are going to play a blackjack, you have to have a current approach, which I uploaded a video. And like I said, you've got that approach related to card clumping, so that you can be able to attack the game the way it is now. And then if you traditionally want to count, you have to limit yourself firstly by table selection, that using John Taramino's ultimate confirmation process, or its variation, which we've talked about in the approach video to current blackjack. And the second thing is that if the cards, when you're counting, you have to make sure you're gonna be using your bet, a variation of your bet And when you do that, you have to make sure that the count is between -7 and a +7. The reason being, you want the cards to be random or close to random, where basic strategy is gonna work. And if the count is going up, tens are likely to come, so you're gonna be successful. And also limit yourself to single and double deck games, as like a real casino experiment by Stuart Perry, published in this book, that we know is true from the theory of blackjack, published by Professor Peter Griffin. Rest in peace. He's already passed away. Yes. So in the next videos, we'll be going into details in some of these things we're talking about. The next one probably will talk about how to even go deeper to expose the shenanigans of people, proponents of card counting, where they are misleading people and making money through boot camps, apps, and working with the same people, where individuals are being paid to promote this, which has got nothing to do with the effectiveness of card counting. Cheers. Hello. Everything Maureen. Yes. Okay, thank you.
You can play your case. Okay.